Amara sat on the edge of the plush sofa in the grand living room, her hands trembling. She had avoided Ikenna's gaze all evening, but now she had no choice. The healer's words echoed in her mind. The spirits remember what we try to forget. Ikenna, there is something I need to tell you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ikenna looked up, his brows furrowing. What is it, Amara? Why are you shaking? Tears streamed down her face as she began. She told him about the triplets, the adoption, and the guilt she'd carried for years. Her words spilled out like a flood, each one hitting Ikenna like a blow. When she finished, silence filled the room. Ikenna's face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. You had children? 3 children? And you gave them away and you didn't tell me? I didn't know what else to do. Amara sobbed. I was desperate. I thought I was giving them a better life. Ikenna stood, his hands clenched into fists. You lied to me, Amara. For years. How can I ever trust you again? Please, she begged, reaching for him. I was trying to protect them. Protect us. He stepped back, shaking his head. I need time. Don't follow me. As the door slammed shut behind him, Amara collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing. The truth was out, but it had torn her life apart. Days passed, and though Ikenna stayed in the house, he acted as if Amara didn't exist. He wouldn't speak to her, or even look her way. Each time she tried to approach him, he turned his back or left the room, leaving her feeling invisible and broken. Amara felt like she was drowning in guilt and loneliness. Her mind turned to Ngozi, her old friend. Maybe she could help. Amara picked up her phone, her fingers trembling. Ngozi, it's me, she said when her friend answered. Amara. Ngozi's voice was cautious. What's going on? We haven't spoken in years. I need your help, Amara said, her voice cracking. It's about my children. There was a pause. Your children? Amara? What are you talking about? Amara explained everything, her shame pouring out with every word. When she finished, Ngozi sighed heavily. Amara, this is a lot. Are you sure you want to dig this up? I have to, Amara said firmly. I can't move on until I find them. Ngozi hesitated, then finally said, All right. Let's meet tomorrow and talk about how to start. Amara hung up, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Ngozi could help her find the children she had lost. The next day, Amara and Ngozi visited the house where Ngozi remembered the adoptive parents had lived. They knocked on the door, and after a moment, an older woman opened it. She looked at them curiously. Good afternoon, Ma, Ngozi greeted politely. We are looking for the family who used to live here. Do you know where they might be? The woman shook her head. I'm sorry, but they sold this house to me years ago. They mentioned they were leaving the country. Amara's heart sank. Do you know anything about them? Anything at all? She asked, desperation creeping into her voice. The woman frowned as she thought. All I know is that they seemed in a hurry to leave. They didn't stay long after the sale was finalized. I'm sorry I can't be of more help. Do you know where they went? Amara asked desperately. The woman shook her head. No one does. They just vanished. Amara and Ngozi exchanged a defeated glance. Thank you, Ma, Ngozi said before they turned to leave. Amara's steps were heavy as they walked away. The faint hope she had clung to now felt more fragile than ever. She turned to Ngozi. What do we do now? We keep searching, Ngozi said. But her tone was less certain than before. For the next few days, they knocked on doors and followed every lead, but it seemed like the couple had disappeared without a trace. Amara's frustration grew with each dead end. Why is this so hard? She cried one evening. I just want to see them again. Ngozi put a hand on her shoulder. We'll find them, Amara. We have to. Weeks turned into months, but Amara and Ngozi's efforts led nowhere. Every lead was a dead end, and their hope began to fade. One afternoon, Ngozi sighed heavily. Amara, maybe it's time to accept that they're gone. No, Amara snapped. I can't give up. I have to find them. Ngozi's voice softened. I understand how you feel, but we've tried everything. They could be anywhere in the world. Amara's eyes filled with tears. I've already lost so much. I can't lose this too. But deep down, she knew Ngozi was right. The trail had gone cold, and there was nothing more they could do. That night, Amara sat alone in her room, staring at the ceiling. The weight of her failure crushed her, and for the first time she allowed herself to wonder if she would ever find her children again. While Amara searched, Ikenna sank deeper into despair. Each evening after work, he went straight to a local bar, drinking until he was numb. By the time he stumbled home, he was so heavily drunk that he couldn't feel the sting of betrayal anymore. The routine began to take a toll on him. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale, and his energy drained. When he came home, he avoided Amara entirely, barely looking at her as he staggered to bed. The house grew colder with each passing day, a silent war zone of shattered trust and unspoken pain. One day, his mother Nkem visited them. She found her son sitting on a couch in the grand living room, a bottle in his hand. She noticed his pale face, the tired slump of his shoulders, and the bitterness in his eyes. "What's happening to you, my son?" she asked, her voice full of concern. In her mind, the answer was already clear. Amara had failed him, and this unhappiness was the result of what she had long feared. "Nothing," Ikenna muttered, avoiding her gaze. "You need an heir," Nkem said firmly. "Amara has failed you. It's time to think about your future." "Leave it, Mama," Ikenna snapped, his tone sharp. But her words lingered. The pressure from his family, combined with his heartbreak, began to weigh heavily on him. He shut Amara out completely, refusing to speak to her or acknowledge her efforts to reconcile. Amara watched helplessly as the man she loved drifted further away, his pain turning him into someone she barely recognized. Nkem decided to take matters into her own hands. One afternoon, she arrived at the house again, but this time with a young woman in tow. "This is Adaobi," she announced, her tone firm. "She is from a good family, and her parents were more than willing to agree to this match. They know who you are, Ikenna, and they understand that every family has challenges. They believe this union will bring honor to their daughter and to our family. She is ready to give you the heir you need." Ikenna's face darkened. "Mama, I don't want another wife." "You don't have a choice," Nkem replied. "I have finalized all the arrangements with Adaobi's family, and she is going nowhere. You need to think about the family name, about your future. Amara has failed you." Adaobi stood quietly, her eyes cast down. Her presence in the house felt like a knife to Amara's heart. She confronted Ikenna later that night. "Are you really going to let her do this?" she demanded. "What do you want me to do, Amara?" Ikenna replied, his voice weary. "Everything is broken. I don't know how to fix it." Amara felt the ground shift beneath her. The cracks in their marriage were widening, and she feared they would never heal. The days grew heavier for Ikenna as his drinking worsened. Each evening he returned from the bar, barely able to walk. Adaobi, unsure of her place in the house, often kept to herself, but one night the tension boiled over. Ikenna stumbled into the living room, his shirt rumpled and his words slurred. Why do I have to deal with this?" he muttered to himself. Adaobi, hearing him, approached cautiously. "Do you need help to get to your room?" she asked softly. He looked at her, his vision blurred. For a moment he saw kindness in her eyes, a softness that reminded him of simpler days before the pain. Without thinking, he reached for her hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though it wasn't clear to whom the apology was meant. Adaobi hesitated but helped him to his feet. In his drunken state, Ikenna misread the moment and kissed her. Shocked, Adaobi tried to pull away, but the line had already been crossed. The next morning, Ikenna woke with a pounding headache and fragments of the night before rushing back. Adaobi avoided him, her face pale and her demeanor anxious. Ikenna's guilt was immediate and overwhelming. "What have I done?" he whispered to himself, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The betrayal of Amara now weighed heavier, compounded by the realization that his actions had only deepened the chaos in their lives. 2 months later, Adaobi approached Ikenna in the living room, her hands nervously clutching the edge of her dress. "Ikenna," she began, her voice trembling. "I need to tell you something." Ikenna, still nursing the remnants of his guilt, looked up warily. "What is it?" Adaobi hesitated, then blurted, "I'm pregnant." The words hit Ikenna like a punch to the gut. He stood abruptly, pacing the room as his mind raced. Finally, he grabbed his phone and called his mother. "Mama, are you happy now?" he said, his voice laced with anger. "This is your doing. You brought Adaobi here and now she's pregnant." Nkem, however, was unfazed. Instead, she let out a delighted laugh. "Praise be to God. This is the blessing we've been waiting for," she exclaimed. "My son, this is not a problem. It's a solution. You will finally have what you need. An heir." Ikenna's frustration deepened, but Nkem was already making plans for a grand celebration, declaring that the child would bring honor and renewal to the family. Ikenna, however, was devastated. He avoided Amara entirely, too ashamed to face her, but Amara found out anyway. She cornered him in the living room one evening, her voice trembling with anger. "You slept with her?" Ikenna looked away, his jaw tight. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I was drunk. I didn't mean to." "That doesn't make it right," Amara shouted, tears streaming down her face. "You've betrayed me, Ikenna. After everything, how could you?" "After everything," Ikenna snapped, finally meeting her gaze. "You betrayed me first, Amara. You lied to me about the children. Do you know what that did to me?" Their voices clashed in a storm of accusations and heartbreak. When Nkem heard about the commotion, all she said was, "Enough." Her tone was cold. "This family doesn't need more chaos. Ikenna, you need to make things right, with Adaobi and the child. Amara, it's time for you to accept the reality of this situation." Amara's world shattered. She realized that her marriage was slipping away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Desperate to regain some sense of purpose, Amara threw herself into one last attempt to find her triplets. With Ngozi's help, she began reaching out to anyone she thought could assist. They called everyone they could think of, but every conversation led to the same disappointing answer. No one had any idea where the adoptive parents had gone. Each effort ended in frustration, and no trace of the family could be found. One evening, as they sat together in Ngozi's living room, Amara's eyes were red from crying, and her hands shook as she held a crumpled piece of paper with yet another dead-end contact. "Ngozi, what if I never find them?" Amara whispered, her voice hollow. Ngozi placed a hand on her friend's shoulder. "Amara, you've done everything you can. Maybe it's time to let go." "How can I?" Amara said, tears streaming down her face. "They're my children. I can't just forget them." Ngozi sighed. "I know. But holding on to this pain is destroying you. You need to find a way to move forward." Amara didn't respond. Deep down she knew Ngozi was right, but the thought of letting go felt like losing a piece of her soul. The final blow came when Ikenna handed Amara divorce papers. His face was unreadable as he placed them on the table. "I can't do this anymore," he said quietly. Amara's hands trembled as she picked up the papers. "You're really ending this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "It's over, Amara," he said, his tone heavy with finality. "I've tried, but there's too much damage. We've both made mistakes we can't undo." Nkem wasted no time celebrating the news. Adaobi became Ikenna's new wife, and the family prepared for the arrival of the baby. Amara, now alone, packed her belongings and left the house that had once been her home. As she stood outside, staring at the bustling city streets, Amara felt the crushing weight of regret. She had lost everything: her marriage, her children, and the life she had once dreamed of. The choices she made, the lies she told, and the secrets she kept had brought her to this point. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered to herself, "What have I done?" There was no way to undo the past, no way to bring back the children she had given up or heal the wounds she had caused. Her actions could never be reversed, and the pain of that truth would haunt her forever.